My name is Subbu. I lead leadership development at DXC Technology. I also run a podcast called Culture Matters. I'm an author. I wrote a book called The Millennials about 10 years ago. Then I got FOMO, keep 10 years, no book. So I've written my second book. It's on the way to the publisher. And that's what the talk is. Right? So the talk is on my second book. So that's a little bit about me. We'll look forward to catching up with all of you post this. Some of you have already spoken to. With that, let me just get started, right? Let me just get straight into it. This is the name of the book, Heal the Workplace. Now, I used to explain people what the book is about, then I just started showing them the name of the book, right? So it makes a lot of sense. They do connect the dots in their mind when they try to figure out what the book's about. So as you may have guessed, it's about mental health challenges in the workplace. It's about burnout, it's about toxicity, it's about hustle, it's about how we don't pay enough attention to sustainability when it comes to workplace cultures. Sustainability is always spoken about in the environmental context, but how do you create sustainable, thriving workplace environments? Right? That's what the book is about. It's due to be published sometime in 2026. I don't know if you know how publishers work, but it will come sometime this year. Right? So that's the promise. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to talk about the entire book. I just have about 5 minutes. So I'm going to take one idea from the book and kind of present it to you. And because you're all in L&D, I will do it in story format, right? So I'm going to present a small story to you. But before I get into the story, I would like to do a little bit of this with you. Raise your hand if you can relate to this. Whoops. That's not supposed to happen. Raise your hand if you can relate to this.
Universities.
Most of you, I think 70% of the hand is raised, 80%. Slowly everybody's raising their hands here. Okay. Raise your hand if you can relate to this. Or at some point you could relate to it, maybe not anymore. At some point you or a friend could relate to this. Okay, lots of nervous laughter means that it's easy. So you don't need to raise your hand, it's fine. Only I'm being recorded, you're not. So it's okay. So this is the first time I'm doing this, okay? You guys are the first audience. I'll do this a lot more time, but thanks for the feedback. A lot of us can relate to both of this, right? So this is burnout and this is toxicity. That's essentially what the book is about. So what I'm going to do is, as I was telling you, I'm going to narrate a small story to you. And I apologize beforehand for the story because I'm sure a lot of us here are animal lovers and pet lovers, myself included. But I'm only going to tell this story in the context of research. Okay? With that context, I'm going to say it, right? And I'll apologize beforehand because it can be slightly painful to hear, but it's important. While I start narrating the story, some of you may realize you know this already, so bear with me. A tale of two dogs. Okay, both of them are good boys, right? Our first main character is Tim. Okay, he's a good boy. And the other character is Tom. Both of them are really good boys. Okay, they have a lot of fun. What happened was both Tim and Tom found themselves in the middle of a social science experiment, which was run in 1967 by two researchers. What happened was Tim was put into an experimental group. Actually, both of them were put into an experimental group. And I'll tell you what happened to Tim first. So let me start with the first condition of the research. So there is some trouble doing that. There's a problem. So what has happened is Tim, as you can see, is in harness. Okay, and there are mild electric shocks, not fatal, but very mild electric shocks that are being administered to Tim. Okay, there's a panel in front of them. You can see that, right? So what can Tim do? If he feels the shock, he can try to touch the panel or tap the panel. And he figures out that over time, if he taps the panel when the shock comes, the shock stops. Right? So he learns that. It's a learned mechanism. He learns that if I do this, something happens and therefore the shocks will stop. So over a period of time, he figures that out and he learns how to stop the shocks from coming into, right? In the original experiment, it was a boop, so they used to do it with their nose, not the paws. This is AI, so. Unfortunately for Tom, there's no panel. Okay, so what do you think he learns in the process?
Live with it.
Yeah, so Tom learns that there's basically nothing I can do. I can maybe move around a little bit. I can jump around, and I can, or maybe stay in place. So he learns that nothing I can do really matters because there's no way out of the situation. But then, because Tim has been given this, contraption, he learns something different. right? It's his environment that's teaching him something different. This is the first part of that research condition. The second part is where it gets interesting. There's more trouble. So in the second part, there's no harness, as you can see, and Tim is in the same space, but there is a barrier in front of it, right? So again, mild electric shocks are killing. What do you think Tim does when the mild electric shocks are given? There's no panel also, remember, but there's no harness either. What do you think he does? Sorry? There's nothing to tap, no? He jumps off. That barrier is actually jumpable. He can just jump out. It's not too tall for him. He can jump off, right? So he's learned that there is something I can do to escape from this situation because of the first condition that he was in, right? What do you think happens to Tom? Stays there, right? Such a powerful experiment. Think about the implications of that. Of course, in the context of the book, I'll tell you we're amazed, but we are all L&D professionals. Let that land for a second, right? What we learn and therefore how we process our environment and how we act is a function of what we consciously learn, right? The two researchers were Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, and Steve Meyer. They ran this experiment in 1967-68, and they came up with a concept called learned helplessness. And this is exactly what happened reported by Tom here, right? And this was the experiment. I'm just going to leave there for a second. I'm going to go through all of this. But the point is that there were three groups. The escape group is what learned, is basically Kim's group, saying that, you can actually jump off, and they learn how to push, which was the first condition. The yoke group is Tom's group. They learned helplessness, which meant nothing I do can change my situation. And there was a control group, which didn't do much, and they jumped off again, right? So there was no a very different kind of a treatment for the control group. Coming back to the point that I was making, whether it's, when I was writing the book, I realized that a lot of us stay in cultures that promote workaholism, toxicity. Why? That was a question I was asking. Right? Why do, myself included, I live in those environments myself. What happened? Like, why do we choose to do that? I spoke to recruiters, I spoke to many people. So people told me that, there's a reputation in the line, you will be seen as somebody who jumps jobs too often. But still, there's no reason for you to be this good boy, right? You can be Tim. You don't need to do this for yourself, right? So part of the reason is that, which is you want to manage our external reputation. The other part of it is internal, right? A lot of us also internalize this saying that nothing I do really matters. It's the same everywhere, right? We become kind of inundated in that milestone. So therefore, we tend to stay back, right? So that brings me to the end of my conversation, which is 3 points of reflections for us. Helplessness is a learned skill. Remember this. Okay, it's a learned skill. We're not born with it. So how do we unlearn it? And in the context of workplace cultures that propagate toxicity, workaholism, what have you, how do we unlearn this in the context of workplace cultures? Number 2, how do we as learning professionals and leadership coaches, many of us work in the space of leadership as well, how do we teach something called as learned optimism? Please check out this book if you haven't. This came out of the research of Martin Seligman, the one that I just showed you. He said that, and I'm not going to get into the details, but he wrote a beautiful book called Learned Optimism, much before he wrote extensively about positive psychology. That was his first research. It's a lovely book. So how do we teach this as learning professionals? How do we imbibe this in ourselves, and how do we kind of propagate that? Is the second point. And the third point is, how can we use science, and particularly social science research? This is meta thinking, the way that I did it. How do we use this in our own methods to make learning really come alive? Okay, that's about it. Oops, sorry. That's about it. This is a sketch note that that's in the book. I'm just going to leave it. This is the last thing I'm going to leave you with. The book has about 7 or 8 pages. It's done by a friend of mine, Arna Shriram. She's based in London, in the UK. And she's done these very original sketch notes. These are not off the internet. These are original. The first time you're seeing this, anyone is seeing this is now. So the book is peppered with a lot of these. Right, so that's my time. I think I'm on time.